So I had this great idea for a game. The player switches between two characters every 5 seconds. Both characters have to make it to the end of a level while avoiding enemies and completing tasks. Each level is a short, fast-paced hurry to the finish. Stand still for one moment and you're going to regret it. Sounds great, right? Well, there's a problem. I only had 6 days to turn my grand vision into reality. That's because it was an idea for a game jam. It takes place every week with a new theme. This week's theme was alternate perspectives. So I thought to myself, when the player switches between characters, they are alternating their perspective of the game world, right? I went with that idea since I couldn't think of a better concept. This video will share some insight into my development process. Maybe some aspiring indie developers will even pick up a few tricks, who knows? As always, I started gathering ideas in a GDD, which is short for Game Design Document. This is what I ended up with. I made sure to keep the number of game mechanics limited, otherwise I would have just repeated the same mistake I've made so many times already. This mistake isn't exclusive to me, however. It's prevalent throughout the profession, from hobby devs like me to big AAA developers. The problem is biting off more than you can chew. Over the years, I have started many projects, but have finished very few. This is because people underestimate the amount of work that goes into making even the simplest of game mechanics. Think of shooting a pistol in your favorite FPS. You need 3D models for the pistol and the magazine. Both require multiple textures for the color, roughness, and a normal map for extra detail. You also need animations for shooting and reloading, which are accompanied by sounds and particle effects like muzzle flashes. All these things have to be combined by the programmer, who needs to make the shooting feel good with proper recoil and maybe a spraying pattern, etc, etc, you get the point. To combat this habit of mine, I devised a rule of thumb. The GDD for my 1-week projects can't be longer than a page. Even half a page is enough already. This limits the amount of mechanics I can have, as well as the amount of depth each mechanic is allowed to have. Because of that, I try to think of a few good mechanics rather than many shallow ones. It's a good approach for quality over quantity. Once I'm happy with the design of my game, it's time to start programming. I've been using Unreal Engine for roughly 4 years by now. It's a suite of many complex tools, so to keep the length of this video reasonable, I'm going to focus on the Blueprint scripting system. Instead of writing code, blueprints provide code snippets called nodes, which you can connect with pins to create very complex behaviors. All of my mechanics use blueprints to function from the characters and the enemies to the start and end points of each level. For this episode, I'm going to focus on the character switching mechanic. Unreal offers a very robust and flexible gameplay framework, which consists of many different blueprints that work together to create interesting gameplay. One such blueprint is the player controller. It isn't actually anywhere in the level, it just controls the player as the name suggests. The actual character that's in the level is a pawn blueprint. To move a pawn, the player controller needs to possess it. Of course, the player controller can possess different pawns during gameplay. This is how I did the character switching. If we open the player controller blueprint, you can see the blueprint graph, which is the scripting editor for blueprints. When the game starts, I store both pawns in the level as two variables called character 0 and character 1. Using a delay node which acts as a timer, the player controller possesses a pawn every 5 seconds with the possess node. For the switching, I check if character 1 is the active character. If so, I possess character 0, otherwise character 1 gets possessed. This is achieved with a branch node, which takes a condition and executes one of the two output pins based on whether the condition is true or false. This mechanic took a few tries to get right, as did the others. I also had to create a few basic 3D models for the game and design a few levels, as well as a main menu and the user interface. You can imagine I spent quite a bit of time on this very simple game. So how did I do schedule-wise? Well, another rule of thumb I use is to plan for 4 days of development, even if I have 6. That's to account for real-life stuff getting in the way like data loss, basically anything that could stop me from working on the game for some time. In the case of this project, I didn't work on the game for 2 days, so my plan worked brilliantly. Before I go over how I published my game, I briefly want to talk about using other people's assets. For my game, I used a music track and some sounds which I didn't make myself. Even though there are many great libraries for free sounds out there, you still have to pay attention to the licensing. Some sounds can be used for every type of project and you might have to give credit. The music track came from a website called purpleplanet.com. It's where I got the background music for this video as well. Credits for the sounds weren't needed, but using the engine did require a copyright notice. Epic Games requires games to have this line somewhere, so I just smashed it at the bottom of the main menu. Then I realized that I needed a name for my game because I've been calling it Doodle 1 throughout development. I settled on Swapmatic and called it a day. Once everything was in order, I packaged the game into a Windows executable and published it to itch.io. The process isn't really that interesting, so I'll skip it. I made sure that my game was submitted as a Game Jam entry and then tweeted about it in the hopes that it would appear on the weekly Game Jam website. What I ended up with were 5 basic levels with no textures and 2 characters shooting blocks out of their equally blocky guns. The music resets every time a new level starts and the main menu looks about as basic as it can get. But I released a game, and that's better than releasing nothing at all. And that was the development of my first ever game doodle. I hope to turn this into a series so I can develop more games and share them with you. This gives me a reason to experiment with Unreal's many interesting systems like the water system and the destruction system. I'll also get something interesting to talk about for future episodes. Maybe I'll even turn one of my projects into a fully fledged game, who knows? And with that I say, Creator out!